Most important thing, HME filters, okay?
Oh,
HME filters, okay? So one, it just warms the gas as well as it's going to give the temperature to the gas. So that's how we are going to reduce the respiratory heat loss uh, from the patient, okay? HME filters is one of the other cost effective way where you can reduce the heat loss from the patient, okay?
yes.
Right. So these are the different mechanism and this is a different way to conserve heat from the patient. Spinal cord damage. So what are the different ways where you can monitor for spinal cord damage?
Sir, neuro monitoring can be done, sir.
Evoke potentials, right?
Yes,
Basically,
sir. Yes,
basically the somatosensory evoke potential and the motor evoke potential. These are two things you do for spine surgeries. When you're doing for brain surgeries, you're gonna go for auditory potential or brainstem evoke response audiometry. Okay, what are the basically these potentials are?
sir, in somatosensory evoke potentials, where we are going to check the integrity of the spinal cord through whether the posterior column is intact or not, sir.
So it is
By
basically to check the dorsal column of the spinal cord. Okay.
yes,
So the dorsal column of spinal cord is one which carries the
sense.
sensory, right? Fasciculus gracilis and the fasciculus cuneatum. Okay, this is the dorsal column. This is how all the sensations are going to ascend up to the brain. So this SSAP predominantly checks the somatosensory evoke potential. Okay, where the potential is given, where it is received.
Sir, potential is given at the peripheral nerve, sir.
Okay,
Commonly,
you're gonna stimulate a muscle here or a nerve here. So once you stimulate the nerve, that is going to carry the sensation ascend along the legs through the spinal cord, and it is received in the brain and the scalp electrodes that is received from the somatosensory cortex in the parietal lobe. So when you get a good signal from here to there, that indicates the intact uh, somatosensory evoke potential or the intact the posterior column tracts and intact sensation. What is MEP? Where do you give the stimulus and where do you record that?
sir, in MEP, stimulus is given at the scalp electrode, sir.
Okay, so
And then,
basically it tests the anterior column or the motor pathway. Okay, so you are stimulating the motor cortex in the brain. So that is going to transmit the signal through the spinal cord and you're going to record the muscle response in the peripheral electrodes. So SCCP will be like this, MEP will be opposite way. All right. So what are the things you look for in the MEP signals?
sir, peripheral nerve impulses or limb movements, sir, actual limb movements.
Limb movement, okay, limb movement, fine. What do you have you seen neuromuscular
Electro-
monitoring recording anytime before?
yes, my electromyographic signals, sir.
Yeah, you look for the muscle response, mainly the myogenic response. All right, so this is a typical myogenic response will be right. So when you give a stimulus, this is the onset of stimulus. This is the beginning of this is onset of potential. This is the beginning of the response. So onset latency from time interval where you give the stimulus and you record the potential is called as the onset latency.
Yes.
Okay. Second thing you look in the MEP is hang on. Second thing you look is the MEP is the peak amplitude. Okay. These are the two things you look for the muscle response. So when there is less than 50% reduction in the amplitude or less than 10% reduction in sorry more than 10% reduction in the latency or more than 50% decrease in the amplitude is going to be a significant affected potential when you record an MEP. Okay, you record a baseline one, and during the surgery, when the surgeon is doing a cord traction, or when the patient is putting screws, when he accidentally injured the cord, what happens? When you give an MEP signal, when you see a more than 10% increase in the latency from the baseline, or when the amplitude has dropped more than 50%, there is a definite chance of having a spinal cord injury. Okay, right? So this is how you monitor the spinal cord damage intraoperatively. Good. Basically, SSEP and MEP recordings. Good. And last one, lung isolation. We'll avoid this one. We'll discuss that in the OSCE station. Venous air embolism is very uncommon in kyphoscoliosis surgery. So these are the four things we're gonna main focus. And your anesthetic plan should be to basically to avoid this If at all, if it is happening, you should be in a position to counteract this, right? So with
Yes.
these things in mind, we'll move on to anesthetic management. That's all, guys. Can you unmute and tell me whether you're able to follow up your understand what are things happening so far?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay. Put your mics back to mute. Now we're gonna anesthetize this patient. So each and every step, you're gonna tell me how do you do inside the OT. That's what the examiners will expect. Don't worry, you miss anything. Don't just tell as a mechanical thing. You tell naturally as you do inside the OT. That is what they want.
Okay. Pre-medication is given, sir.
Okay, that's a pre-medication. I think most of the centers they don't give, right? If at all, since being a pediatric, you can give a midazolam, oral midazolam or dexmer, anything you can give, right?
And then two large bore IV cannulas.
Two large bore IV cannulas. This is the first and foremost important, and preferably in the upper limbs. Don't get IV access in the lower limbs. Okay. Right. Two
Yeah.
large bore IV upper limb. Fine. Second.
And a baseline ECG.
Okay. Attach all the monitors. Right. You have got an IV access. Patient is lying in the OT table. You have attached all the baseline monitors. Since the patient is asymptomatic, only thing you can need since long duration surgery, apart from regular ASM monitors, you can use invasive arterial blood pressure. Okay, that is all enough. Central line, CVC line is not mandatory. It all depends upon the institutional practice. But invasive blood pressure monitoring is very important because it's a long duration surgery. Okay, right. Fine.
And patient is induced with glycopyrrolate.
All right. So you're gonna induce with glycopyrrolate.
Right? Propofol.
You're gonna give propofol. Before
Yes.
that, adequate pre-oxygenation. That's why I said
Sorry.
do as you do inside the OT. Okay, don't tell just a mechanical. Okay, this is what you do normally, isn't it?
Yes.
Before giving anything, you give oxygen to the patient, right?
Yes.
So just remember you are inside the OT and just tell anything. That's why only then you'll not miss anything, right? You're gonna pre-oxygenate adequately.
Yes.
Pre-oxygenation is very important. Then you're gonna induce with propofol.
Propofol. Yes.
Propofol is agreed. How much dose you give? Before that, weight of the patient.
Sir.
Weight of the patient is 21 kg, right?
2 kg, sir.
How much propofol you give?
Sir, 2 mg per kg, sir.
So in exam, tell the exact dose how much you give, or in a range. Say for example, 40 to 50 milligram.
Yes.
Okay, 40 to 50 milligram propofol is given. Then
And fentanyl, 50 micrograms is given, sir.
50 micrograms fentanyl, IV fentanyl, right?
And then I'll give atracurium 0.5 mg per kg.
Atracurium 0.5 milligram per kg, which is roughly around say 12 milligrams.
Yes.
Okay, 12 milligrams of atracurium is given.
Yeah.
Right, you are
And
ventilated for 3 minutes. Ventilation is easy. Everything is fine. So, what size tube you choose?
10. 5, 10 kg, 20.
Okay, 5 or 5.5 size tube. So, always tell one size smaller, one size bigger, right? So, 5 size tube. Until that, you're gonna have two sizes, one bigger one, one smaller one in your hand, right?
Yes.
So, you have intubated the patient, right? You have
Yes.
secured the tube, you intubate the patient, connect the patient. How are you going to maintain?
Sir, and also I would like the bite blocks, sir.
Very good, right? Right, this patient, after intubating the patient, you have to secure with the bite block. Reason we'll discuss later. So bite block is important. I'll tell the reason when it goes on to subsequent discussion. Fine. So bite block is kept. Then how are you going to maintain?
Maintain with sevoflurane less than 0.5 max.
Sevoflurane
Oxygen,
less than 0.5 mac. Then
oxygen and air, sir.
oxygen and air. Why?
Because nitrous oxide will signals won't be properly.
Okay, when you're planning to do an evoke potential like MEP or SSCP, you have to plan your anesthetic agents in such a way that it doesn't interrupt the biological signals. Okay. Of course, all of the anesthetic which you use tend to interrupt, of which the minimally interrupted thing is going to be propofol.
Yes, sir.
Propofol and opioids are the one which is going to minimally interrupt. Nitrous oxide affects the signals very, very badly. So nitrous oxide is not at all used in patients with MEP or ACCP. Second thing is volatile agents. Okay, volatile agents between 0.5 to 1 Mac, it has been documented that they could avoid. So if at all if you're using, you should use less than 0.5 Mac. Okay, when you're using less than 0.5 Mac, what happens to the consciousness of the patient? They tend to be awake. The chances of awareness is much high. So that is why in majority of the institute, the preferred technique for maintenance is going to be TIVA.
Yes.
Okay, total intravenous anesthesia, where we're going to give propofol infusion and an opioid infusion. Either it could be fentanyl or remifentanil, right? So propofol infusion, oxygen, air, and remifentanil is the best technique when you're planning for doing an evoke potential surgery. Of course, if you don't have remifentanil, you can give a propofol infusion manually if you don't have TIVA syringes or TIVA pumps. Give propofol infusion. If at all, if you're going to use SIVO, try to use both propofol infusion and a SIVO, trying to maintain a MAC of less than 0.5. All right.
Yes.
Right. So this is the maintenance technique you have to follow. Right. Before next, what do you do? All everything set. You start at the maintenance. What are the next thing you do?
Positioning of the
Okay. Positioning of the patient. You're gonna make the patient prone. Okay. So have adequate people. Okay, check all the pressure point parrot are available before turning the patient. Right, now turned position, what are the things you check?
um,
From
sir,
head to toe.
yes.
Start from head to toe so that you don't miss
Head,
anything.
the head is in neutral position or not.
Head
Too
neutral.
much action should not be there.
Sorry, head in
So
neutral, then
eyes should be properly padded.
eyes, head and properly parrot, then
Tube should be properly secured.
tube
And
should be secured properly. That's in supine. Okay, once you turn the position, what are the important thing you check in the tube? It is not kinked or bent.
thinking,
So preferably when you're
yes,
using a 5 size, you forgot to tell it's going to be flexometallic tube. Okay, preferably flexometallic tube is ideal when you're putting the patients for prone. Okay, so ideally flexometallic tube. Once you say secure the tube, if you're not using flexometallic, make sure that there is no any kink or
Okay.
any obstruction in the tube. Then what are the things you check in the tube? Tell me, what do you do normally when you turn the patient prone? Head and
and
neck is over. Next, coming to the chest. What do you do in the chest?
um, chest compression should be avoided by properly placing the bellows.
Okay, chest
And
compression avoided. Then most important thing which you do normally inside the OT.
ECG monitors are attached. Sir.
All the monitors attached, everything is fine. Before that,
Auscultation.
Consultation
good.
also.
Okay, you have to check. See, this all you do inside the OT, isn't it? Again, I'm telling you, correct? Once you turn the patient, once you do lateral position or prone or whatever it is, once the position is changed, check the air entry bilaterally. Okay. So prone position, if there is a mild neck flexion, tube can become endobronchial. And already a compromised lung, if it's a patient having respiratory lung disease, the patient tend to have an horrible hypoxemia and increased airway pressure. So check the bilateral air entry. If you don't tell this point, it's going to reflect very bad. All right. So
Okay.
don't forget to mention this point. Any patient prone position, make sure once I put to the patient the prone, I'll check the bilateral air entry. It is very, very important you mention this point. Okay,
Okay.
right. So tubes are checked, chest is over, chest no compression, all everything is fine. Then coming to the abdomen.
So before positioning, I forgot catheter urinary to check for the
Uh,
urinary.
urinary
Put,
catheter has to be placed. Among the monitors, you're going to put the urinary catheter as well as put the temperature monitoring, nasopharyngeal probe, right?
um,
Abdomen, what do you do? No compression, abdomen should be free.
yes.
Okay, good. Then coming to the legs.
um, like there should not be any extension or
Don't overstretch. Okay,
force.
don't
Yes.
overstretch in the legs. Make sure the kneecap and the ankle is adequately padded. Okay, those are the most prominent pressure junctions, isn't it? Pressure points. So those are adequately padded. Since it is a long duration surgery, patient has to be put on mechanical DVT pumps. Okay.
Yes.
So these are things you look in the legs. So this is how you do a head to toe examination once you fully turn the patient. So connect all the monitors back, make sure IV line is free, IV line is going freely, adjust the hand appropriately. Since you're going to put arterial line, make sure the arterial line cannula is properly secured, because when the surgeon tend to move here and there, they tend to disconnect the attachment. Make sure all the attachments are very tight. All right.
Yes.
So these are things you look when the patient is turned prone. Once you check, attach everything, when you connect the ventilator, check the airway pressure. Okay. That's another clue which can tell you that the patient is gone for endobronchial intubation or if there is any abdominal compression. When the patient is having high airway pressure, make sure the patient tube is not compressed, the circuit is completely free of compression, the apial valve is not obstructed. Coming to the patient, tube is not endobronchial and abdomen is free. These are the
Yes.
things you have to look for in a patient who is having a high airway pressure after turning prone. Say what happens, right? You have turned, you have connected, airway pressure is very high, patient is desaturating. What do you do?
Firstly, I'll check for the if there is any tube kinking or
All right, tube kink is fine. Then first thing you have to do is increase the FiO2 immediately, right? Give 100% oxygen, disconnect from the ventilator and manually ventilate and see with a handbag. Okay.
Yes.
Manually ventilate and feel for the lung compliance. Okay. When you feel the lung compliance is stiff, either it could be obstruction anywhere in the circuit, starting from the apial valve in the machine to the tube, or it could be pneumothorax or anything which is compressing the lung secondary to abdominal compression. So you have to look for all these things. In the meantime, if you couldn't find any reason very soon, what do you do?
Okay.
To the normal position.
Get
Fine.
good. Immediately turn the patient to supine, right? They're not able to find exactly why the reason the patient is not able to ventilate properly or when there is desaturation, immediately turn the patient back, make sure things, everything are fine, and then reposition the patient. Okay, no compromise in that. Okay. Right. So that is why before giving the patient to the surgeon, make sure each and every bit is, because once they start doing the skin incision, you don't have access to anything, either the tube or either the IV lines or the arterial lines or the legs or nothing. You can't touch anything. So you have to be 200% sure that everything is fine before giving the patient to surgery. Even a minimal compromise, don't have a second thought, immediately turn the patient back, secure everything. And because a 1 minute pain is better than pain for 6 hours, right?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So you've attached prone, everything is fine. Maintaining with propofol and SIVO of less than 0.5%. Right. So now intraoperatively, surgeon is doing the screws, everything is looking good. After doing the putting the rods, he is compressing and doing a spinal fusion. After compressing, the neural physiologist telling you that MEP signals is dropped. What do you do?
I'll check. I'll lighten the
Relax
depth.
down, Shruti. Relax. Don't
Yes.
get panic. If an MEP signals is dropped, both the neurophysiologist and the surgeon will turn immediately on your face. All right. So they will turn immediately only on you, because surgeon will not put a blame that he has put some wrong correction. So they will tell whether everything in the anesthetic is fine. So that's the first thing both the neurophysiologist as well as the surgeon will ask you. Now MEP is dropped, they're telling you, what do you do now?
Sir, I'll check if the oxygenation is proper or not.
Good. Oxygen level. So make sure patient is not hypoxic. Excellent.
Then I'll check if the bolus of the anesthesia drug or muscle relaxants, like,
Okay, patient
is-
is not in a deeper plane.
yes. And
Then,
hello.
yeah, next, yeah, hypoxia, you'll look for hypoxia. You look for the
And
plane of anesthesia. Then
I'll increase BP, sir.
increase the blood pressure. So there is no hypotension. Immediately increase the blood pressure with vasopressors. Right. Next,
Next, I'll check for the output, urinary output, sir, input output.
has it got any role with the MEP?
No, sir. I'll check the limb position, sir.
No. Check the temperature.
Yeah, temperature.
So you should know what are the factors which are going to affect MEP. Only when you know the factors which are going to affect the MEP, then only you're gonna alter change that to get the signals back, isn't it? So what are the factors which is going to affect MEP? Anesthetic agents, hypoxia, hypothermia, hypercarbia. These are the four factors, right? So when you want to correct that, make the patient is not hypoxic, make the patient is not too very too secondary to anesthetic agents like increased MAC value of volatile, or if the patient is nitrous, cut off nitrous. Make the patient is not hypotensive, because hypotension, poor spinal cord blood flow, that can cause poor MEP signals, right? And next thing is hypothermia. Avoid hypothermia. Lastly, glucose. Avoid hypoglycemia. So these are the factors which can, from the anesthetic point of view, they can decrease the MEP signals. Make sure you optimize all these things before proceeding for further thing. All right, before proceeding for what happened from our side. One, everything, these things are fine. Then you can advise the surgeon to release a traction on the cord or release the pressure on the rods which are going to use for fusion. Okay. This is how you manage a patient who is having a decreased intraoperative MEP signals. Good. Now you are working in an institute where there is no provision for evoked potential or MEP neurophysiological monitoring. What are the things you can do?
Sir, wake up test can be done.
Okay, that is called as the Stagnara's wake up test.
Yes.
Okay, how do you do it?
Sir, before taking for the surgery, I would explain the patient and the
Okay.
patient.
Mentally preparing the patient. Preparation of the patient is very important. Okay, you have to counsel properly that patient will be asked to move the leg, but you have to make sure that you will not remember anything which is happening during the surgery. Because if you go and tell the patient you will wake up during the operation and ask you to move the leg, they'll get scared. Okay, so preparation of the patient and the psychological preparation is very important, and that is what the key reason for having a proper successful wake up test. All right, so how do you do a wake up test?
Sir, I lighten the plane of the anesthesia
Okay,
and I would give commands to the patient
okay.
to
So
move the
when you
plane.
have an issue with the language, you have to preoperatively communicate with the patient and see which is the best way to communicate with him. Okay, and you have to
Yes.
have those words. You can ask him to move either the upper limb or lower limb and make sure the patient is having any weakness or not. Right.
Yes.
So this is how was done in institutes where evoke potential is not done. Of course, there are so many advantages, disadvantages of wake up test. Don't worry, we can leave it now. So when you do a wake up test, make sure the patient will tend to lift his head. He will move his hand. So all the lines or 2, 3 people are there to help you immediately hold the patient and give back the proper fall when the wake up test is done immediately. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So carefully secure the lens. Carefully secure the patient head when you're planning to do a wake up test. Right. So surgery is over. All things are done, and you're gonna extubate a patient. Patient is extubated, fine. What is the post-operative pain management?
Sir, post-operatively, opioids can be given. Sir, opioids.
Okay, you can use IV opioid infusion. We can give paracetamol, NSAIDs, right?
This
And then you can use alpha 2 agonist. Similarly, temperature management, the post-op period is very important. Always keep the mean arterial pressure more than 60 because spinal cord perfusion is more important in the post-operative period. Again, the similar goals. Avoid hypoxia, avoid hypertension, avoid hypothermia, avoid hypoglycemia. These are the 4 factors which could cause a spinal cord injury, right?
yes.
Good. Excellent. Any question, guys? SL can unmute and he can discuss any questions in kyphoscoliosis management.
So can we use dexmedetomidine?
Yes, I have used so many cases of scoliosis. I use dexmedetomidine. Dexmedetomidine is an excellent drug. I've used both during induction as well as a continuous infusion because since I don't have remifentanil, I've used propofol and dexmed infusion as a part of pain management. But the most recent review article for the pain management published last year has shown that either of dexmed or opioid infusion or an epidural morphine or intrathecal morphine, nothing is shown to be promising, whereas low dose ketamine infusion.
Sir, but it will increase the motor evoke potential.
Yeah, it has got a potential to increase, but a low dose of 0.2 to 0.3 milligram per kg per hour, which is a sub anesthetic dose, hasn't got a much more, I mean, influence is going to be very minimal. If at all, if you feel that it is influencing, you can stop it and recheck. If the signals are okay, you can continue. Low dose ketamine has been shown to be promising evidence for having reducing the acute pain as well as chronic pain development in spine surgeries. So other agents which could be tried is you can give opioids, you can give Dexmed, you can give paracetamol, you can give NSAIDs, you can give magnesium. So these are the different drugs which has been tried.
Sir, post-op visual loss management.
Post-op visual loss management is nothing, just only promising. You have to maintain the key factors like hypoxia, hypotension, and hypovolemia. All the things has to be corrected. All right. If it's a blindness is due to ischemic optic neuropathy, prognosis is going to be very poor.
Thank you.
Steroids has got a no role at all in spinal cord injury as well as in ocular blindness.
Epidural channeling, sir, intraoperative.
Epidural.
Channeling, intraoperative.
Yeah, I mean, some institutes, it depends upon institution practice. In Australia and New Zealand, what they do is before closing the epidural space, they give an epidural catheter, put a surgeon manually inside the catheter. Epidural morphine or epidural local anesthetic is a very, very good pain management technique, but it is not followed in all places.
Sir, but if they put drain, will it not reduce?
Will it not reduce me? I don't understand.
I mean, anesthesia would be maintained, sir. If they put
Yeah, I
drain.
mean, the drain generally they don't produce close to the cord. They give only at the submuscular level. Okay. So this you are going to give at the epidural level. So okay, it's so unusual for the drain to reduce the effect of epidural catheters.
So if the position of the spine would be above the level of heart, are there chances of venous ear embolism?
Sorry, if the position is above the level of heart.
Position of the spine is above the level of heart. Are there chances of venous ear embolism?
Yes, the thing is venous air embolism generally happens when the veins are open close to the bones and when the venous pressure is lesser than the atmospheric pressure. These are the two possible theoretical way venous air embolism can happen. Okay, so not only the spine surgery, any spine surgery, even in the pelvic surgeries, when you put when the heart is below the level of, when the pelvic is higher level compared to the heart, what happened? The venous pressure in the pelvis is going to be much lesser than the heart. So when it drops below the atmospheric level, it is going to drag the air from the atmosphere. But however, in spine surgeries, venous air embolism, it's so unusual to be documented. But theoretical possibility is there where you can get a venous air embolism.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. Shall we stop then? Hello.
The next class will be
Next class, we'll discuss pediatrics, okay?
Okay.
Very good, Shruti. Very good presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
So please put the recording on website.
Yeah.